Welcome to the podcast that is guaranteed to improve not only your photography, but your mind, body, and spirit as well. Full of interviews with the top image makers in the industry, where we talk photography, drink whiskey, and fill up the bathtub with High Life and PBR. So grab a juice box, a handful of unsalted almonds, and get ready for the show.
So how many of you got almonds for the show?
Can I ask a quick question about that before we start? Did he say unsalted or unsorted?
Unsalted. But it's assumed they're unsorted because how?
Well, I was just like sort of disappointed because I was like,
handful of almonds.
Does Christopher Walken sort his almonds?
You think he doesn't?
Why don't I sort my almonds?
In alphabetical order from biggest to smallest.
Yeah. Okay. Say it again.
I'm sorry.
This time like Christopher Walken.
That's why that joke fucks, David, because it doesn't make sense. It's an interruption in logical thinking. All right.
Love
this episode, we still have Sef McCullough as co-host. David Parish and our very own Dustin Valkema.
Yeah.
Dustin Valkema.
Sure.
Yeah, Valkema's his middle name.
That's cool. You made his last name into Valkema.
Yeah.
Because they sound
you say
like
it fast.
Close.
I'm a simple man.
Okay.
I'm a simple man. I don't, doesn't take a lot to amuse me or entertain me.
I'm totally.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
All right, so
I'm here for it.
I'm here for it.
I had it on volume low.
Your button
Damn
didn't
it.
work.
The button didn't work. Now it's going to.
I'm here for it.
All right.
Thanks, Jay.
Dustin, what a week.
What's up? Yeah.
How you feeling? You tired?
I'm feeling great, actually. Yeah.
I want to talk about your conversation you had with Sef yesterday. That's a YouTube video. That was amazing. What was it like for you guys to have that combo?
Do you remember yesterday?
For you to teach him Photoshop shortcuts.
I remember. Do you remember yesterday?
I remember
yesterday. I think it was yesterday. I feel like the days kind of all meshed together. But
does it seem so far away?
It does seem far away.
All your troubles?
All the troubles are, yeah.
How far do you guys want to go with this?
I have no idea.
At least to Abbey Road.
The days do blur together on a set like this.
Yeah, so it was a really good conversation. I don't know that I've actually had a pro instructor and retoucher and amazing artist go through my Photoshop files before.
You were freaking out. You're like, "Oh my god, no! We can't be looking at my file."
So, to put a little bit of.
He wanted to do it in Lightroom, remember? He wanted to be like, here's the 3 frames. Like, this is as far as you can go. Here's the before, here's the after, here's the after.
Is this an unfiltered? Is this an unfiltered podcast?
Thanks for listening to our other podcasts.
It's been very honest in the past. So
when you don't give a shit sometimes, and
that's the cuss word you thought.
That's kind of how it is.
That's it. We're gonna get hit by the FCC now. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin, for dropping the S word.
We can just drop
Jesus.
that. Yeah. Anyways, there are definitely times where, as an artist, when you're like just building a Photoshop file and you're doing certain things and teaching certain things that help get the point across, and you want to make it understandable. And then when you have somebody like Sef go through the Photoshop file, it's kind of like, damn, that's going to be an interesting
experience. Sort of like when your teacher's going through your math problems to make sure you did them in the right steps, and you're like,
look at how I got there.
I just
like it doesn't matter how I got there. I got the right answer.
I just got
once you got to show your work, and your teacher's
result.
Going through it, and you're like, crow.
And then they find out that you just have a calculator
you cheated?
on your phone, and you cheated everything. But it was a good experience.
Man,
a fun time.
So that's worth talking about, because like I think that perception should be like corrected, because especially me, you know, now like my ethical position in terms of, you know, evaluating work is like, what is it that you needed to do to get that done? Did you do it in a way that worked? Did you do it in a way that shipped? And honestly, like, I find out more new ideas from looking at files from people who are not career high-end retouchers per se, right?
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, that's actually really smart. Like, I would not have thought of that. And now I'm going to do that. And, you know, that's kind of like a good point for a lot of the high-end retouchers out there who sort of, you know, are a little dogmatic, I guess, about process and the way you do things and all that. It's great. It's great. I understand. But there are so many different techniques suited to so many different situations at different scales. And so when I was looking through your file, I was like, oh, that was exactly appropriate for that scale. And I probably in this situation wouldn't have done that differently. And the way that you use the tools that you created in C4D, I learned a bunch of stuff that I didn't know. And I've done this, you know, we talk about it. I've done it plenty of times. And you were showing me ways of using your tools that you output from C4D in ways that I was like, I kind of wish I would have known some of those tricks when I was working on CG files.
Yeah. So, you know, like post discussion that we had yesterday, it was very eye-opening because I would have had no idea, you know, and this is when you get wrapped into a creative box and you just get used to doing your thing, how you do it, or say, you know, what an industry standard is, or once you break that industry standard, you're like, I don't have to do the same stuff the same way anymore. You know, what was, you know, a kind of a nervous moment turned into like a great moment of like sharing perspectives and, you know, clarity on a lot of things, you know, and it was definitely interesting.
I think that fear, and I'm curious, you know, for photographers too, that fear of like somebody's going to see that I kind of am not sure that I knew exactly what I was doing, or not exactly sure what the most pro way was, and people are looking at me like a pro.
Do you think some of that is, first question, do you think some of that is because a lot of people learn from pros, and so the pros are only passing on their technique? Because honestly, that's probably all they know. They've developed that over time, and like we've talked about before, they have kind of forgotten the whys of what they did, and this is just the how of what we did. So repeat after me if you want to be in my field. So do you think that's potentially some of the reason why those things start to come around, is that we should play a drinking game called, if Dustin says industry standard, I can't even say it, then we drink. But if we establish something as the industry standard, that's sort of the way that it has to be done. But what happens if somebody doesn't know that standard, but they're still seeking to achieve the same results? So they're sitting there and fumbling through a bunch of different methods and potentially discovering a better vehicle to do it with.
Totally.
For sure. Yeah, I really, you know, as somebody who's worked in the 3D or the CGI industry for years, I think the most nerve-wracking part for me was, you know, from a very high-level photo retoucher, you know, like multifaceted, coming into like the space that I work in that, and, you know, just strictly CGI. Like there's no photo elements to it aside of, you know, the pixels of that image. And, you know, it was more curious. I was like nervous, but it was like, I wonder what he's going to say, because there are industry standard. I mean, when people, you know, I see it all the time online. They're like, oh, frequency separation, like it's horrible. You overdo it. You do this and that. I'm just like, well, sometimes it works. Like sometimes it works for certain applications, and understanding the tools, really any of the tools, and how to use them and when to use them is highly beneficial.
Well, I think a lot of understanding an industry standard is also understanding its usage in the industry. So if something is destined for social media, there's probably a different level of application that you need to lay on it. If something's destined for a magazine, it needs to be a certain way. If something is going to be a billboard, I mean, and I've shot billboards before, just to be clear, and I think that there's a lot of fudging you can do because you're never, ever going to be close to that object. It's huge, but you'll never be close to it. You'll never be able to pixel peep it from way back here on the road where you were going to be.
You're basically talking about scaling workflows, basically. You're scaling your processes, because I could easily spend the amount of time that I spend on a high res consumer facing product shot that's going to be at retail checkout
and at face value, right? Like right here
in
somebody's face in a magazine, for those that are listening, like in a magazine that I can hold and get as close as I want to.
Or like a poster where the shoe is actually 5 times the size of a shoe, so you can see every molecule in it. I'm not going to apply those finished techniques to something that's going to be going on an Instagram campaign.
Right.
Because this is what all the brands we work with are doing now. All of these campaigns are deploying to social platforms almost with that as a priority. And so understanding I can't spend 4 hours on that. I need to know how to scale back all the techniques. You know, is there something like that in the CG side and C4D? Are you confronted with that ever?
Definitely.
Like, what's final usage?
Definitely, for sure. And it's stuff that we talk about probably even more than I should, is understanding what the expectations are, understanding client expectations and what they need. You know, say that the Photoshop file you went through yesterday is definitely an example of something. If I were, say, doing this for Nike and it was a very high level, whatever type of ad, you know, like this is, I may have had to spend 5 times longer and really get intricate with certain things. You know, treating it like it's a masthead for a website is a different issue. You know, it's a very different type of process. And, you know, though the final result and the final aesthetic can be the same, the amount of scrutiny and detail you go into as a retoucher, compositor, or whatever is, you know, there's levels to it.
Basically based on scale and
all of it,
relationship to the viewer.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember the camera called the Lightroom when that came out?
The one that did like the multiple adjustable depth of field.
It was like a long tube.
Yeah.
I think it was like a Kickstarter. I don't think it ever came about, but the premise was I could take a photo of anything, whether it's an environment or a person, and then in post, I could choose where the focus was.
Yeah, so it was like, and it was
info.
like a square. It was like a rectangle, like that was probably, it looked like about that long, like the size of a pin maybe, but like thicker. So, but you're looking through it kind of like a kaleidoscope. And then when you push the button afterwards in their software, you got to pick where your focal point was, because it was taking multiple images.
It was basically saying, why choose to shoot 2.8 when you could just shoot f/22 and then turn it into 2.8 later on. So
it was just basically bracketing depth of field.
Yeah, I mean, more or less, yeah.
Which never came to fruition, and I don't know why, but that's kind of one of the things that I look at CGI with those goggles on. And I'll get to the second one after this, but how cool is it that you can create the scene and then be like, man, like I'm not digging f8. Maybe it's 2.8, or maybe this is a f16 or a f22. You get to make those choices.
Yeah, you can pick focal points that don't even exist.
You can make those choices at the speed at which you can make those choices after the fact, so you can go back in time and change. The other lens, or the other way that I think I have come to have these aha moments with CGI is the amount of layers that you or renders, as you guys call them, that you output and create and put them in the oven, bake, all have all of these different functions for highlights, shadows, white points, all of these different things, like the ambient occlusion layer. Like
what is the ambient occlusion layer, Gary?
Test.
The ambient occlusion is kind of like this white, like clay that has the ambient light, but also how it interacts with how close things are together with one another, and then creates this like shadow based on the properties of
The
proximity. Right?
Oh,
so
Absolutely. Wow.
yeah. So how cool is it to create this scene and this setting that then allows you to then manipulate and choose where you put shadow and where you put light? And that's what photographers do. Like when they approach a scene, they're like, I'm going to put light there, I'm going to put shadow there. Maybe after the fact, you're like, shit, I don't want so much shadow there. And then you're like, you rely on your dynamic range to maybe pull that out, but maybe you don't have that camera. It doesn't fucking matter with CGI because you can then render those layers and be like, I'm going to bring that back out or put that back in. So you have the ultimate choice of where you want to put things, where you want to focus, and also how big things are going to be.
that was one of the biggest realizations for me when you were taking me through your file. Was I normally get these files just sight unseen from CG artists. I have very limited conversations with them. You were taking me through. And I think the eye-opening part of it was that I was basically looking at luminosity masks, what photographers and retouchers would refer to as luminosity masks, because we use those extensively, but they're based on contrast. You were showing me masks that were based on distance, proximity,
Color, everything.
foreground, background, like an object's, you know, maybe like a material's values, right?
Right.
These are the things that we would really like to have in photography, because we would love a camera that did that. But you have that in C4D right now.
Right.
Yeah, it's incredible.
C4D is really just like a different sensor that can create this raw image that you have choices, like it's unlimited. And the third thing after my second thing would be the dynamic range of where you want to put light. So it's like, imagine having a sensor where you could be like I've got 258 stops like to choose from, like in post. Like right now, like we geek out over 12 stops. It's like, I could pull out 12 stops or whatever. There's no fucking limit in CGI. So that's like the third thing of like, I can pull out shit. And then also like maybe the fourth thing is, I want to like add in all these crazy fucking lighting elements to the background or to whatever I'm lighting. And it's just like the ultimate dynamic fucking raw image.
And the final thing that's so cool about C4D is that your tripod is always locked, and I can't walk on your set and accidentally bump it.
Well, hold on. Okay, so that was a funny point. Because I mean it was it was an instance, but your camera can be locked, so it's not always locked. It's not locked by default, and anybody that watches my tutorials knows that pros kind of accidentally bump cameras too, because I do it.
What do you do? What do you? And I'm sorry, I haven't watched the tutorial yet. What do you do when you bump a virtual camera?
Control-Shift-Z.
And it just jumps right back.
Undo. You don't know how many times I want that in life.
And then you lock it. So
right.
you don't you usually only make the mistake like in one file.
Yeah.
But there's definitely times where you're moving along very quickly, and we had it with say the donut image we were compositing yesterday.
Wasn't that a bagel?
It was a bagel. Not the.
It was a drywall.
It was an MDF.
So yeah, we won't talk about the first one. I'm talking about
sorry.
the second one.
I mean, donut.
Yeah, the first
frosted bagel.
The first
second one
thing,
you bought.
made of wood.
The first thing was horrible.
He's like, can I get a budget for this, Gary? No. Oh, I'm gonna buy it anyway because I don't want to look stupid again for the second video.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. That's exactly how it went.
Buy my own donut.
You know, and it's smarter, not harder, and that's I will still stand by that. And cheat when possible. As a creative, like don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to.
No, totally.
There's no way in hell I would actually sit and make a donut when there's millions of donuts out there. So I would have one on my desk that I'm eating, and I would buy the other one from one of the other.
Yeah, there's like a
sites.
couple CG artists in the world who would high five you for spending all the extra time to make that.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing too. So we can talk about this. It really like the creative industry, I'll say as a whole, kills me. And we're not just going to paint like any one genre, in the box, because I see photographers do it. I see CG 3D artists do it. Painters do it. Audio engineers, freaking
beat makers.
Everybody.
We talked
right?
about all that. Yeah.
We get these like elitist or purist or whatever you want to call it. These egotistic beings that believe that in order to truly create, you have to do everything from scratch. And there's a difference between taking pride in being able to do everything from scratch and understanding how to do it from scratch, and actually wasting the time to do everything from scratch that you don't have to do from scratch, especially when you're getting paid for it. So, in the case like yesterday, I went and I bought a donut. I mean, there was no way that I would make a donut, especially after the first corkboard one came to fruition. I wasn't compositing that one to do the scene. And, I feel like this is very much how, even CGI is being viewed by many in the photography industry, because you immediately go on the defense. And it's like, well, CGI is not going to take my job. Well, I mean, it's really impeding on multiple industries. Well, CGI isn't for me because I have a studio and da-da-da-da-da. Well, you can make it more creative. Like you could be a bit more limitless. Whatever the defense is. And it's just a tool that's here. And yes, it's been in movies. It's been in, TV. And most times people don't even know it, especially in broadcast. Many people don't even really realize that when you're watching something like Gilmore Girls on Netflix, there's a lot of CGI in there.
I usually am able to now pick out all the CGI stuff in Gilmore Girls.
But
Mrs. Gilmore is actually CGI.
No, she's like,
Gilmore's not real.
but
they're all, it's not even real.
Yeah, no, her left arm is actually real.
Neither is Alexis Bell.
Everything but the left arm.
I don't know.
We haven't seen her in anything else, so she must not exist.
So that was because
Mrs. G. This is CG.
Hey
guys,
CG.
dad jokes. I'm here all week.
Okay.
High five. Yeah,
I think
I live here.
Yeah, like my fear of CG comes from, 10, 15 years ago, 3D Studio Max, Maya, then Modo, all this stuff that seemed super, super hard.
Right.
And I know how hard it is because I've watched people learn it over years, and then to see this era now where we're having so much more support for bridging the gap of the hard stuff, right? Like being able to buy your donut,
Right.
Being able to just go on a marketplace, download these models.
He didn't even get a dozen donuts. He just went in and got one.
I would have got a bigger.
I guess it was two.
It was three, actually.
This was not a company budget. I mean, I'm just saying. All I needed was one donut. I'm watching my figure, okay?
They were providing you with creative constraints, I think. That's
Yeah.
Is
It
that-
had
is that how
nothing to
we're
do
gonna
with
frame
budget.
that?
It had everything to do with let's make them sweat. And for those of you listening, if you haven't seen this video, there's a very well-known blender guy that's like, hey, go make a donut. And it's a challenge. It's a call to action. So at the end of this tutorial, you basically sat Dustin and Jeff down. Jeff is this like master modeler in Modo, and he's currently transitioning and learning Cinema 4D.
So he took his Modo.
Doesn't know it as well as Modo. He's been doing it for forever. And he worked with Dustin in another agency for many years. And they sat down and they were sweating. They're like, "What are we doing, Gary? What are we do? Like, come on!" And then like we pressed record and then told them, "All right, you guys need to make a donut in 60 minutes or less. You model it, you perfect it. It's got to be edible." And it was a disaster.
It was
edible.
It was a beautiful disaster. If you've ever seen a cork donut, it looked like tree bark.
I'm still going with MDF. It was
like
MDF.
It may have been
MDF.
Yeah.
But how difficult would that be to make in real life?
I don't know. I'd probably use MDF.
I would use MDF and some super glue, and yeah, it was definitely it was a really fun experience. As much as I mean, you sweat in the moment, and it was an utter disaster, but that is definitely the kind of stuff that, as a professional that has been doing this stuff and creating beautiful things for a long time now, you're like, make a donut.
Yeah. But that,
Quickly, dude, sweet.
Yeah, I've never sat down and been like, you know what, I'm gonna make a donut. Now I
Yeah,
did start the
today's
blender
donut
donut,
day.
but that's neither here
And you
nor
made
there.
a toilet, and that's basically the same thing.
And I made a toilet. Like, yeah, I mean, like, beautiful toilet. We rendered a toilet for Home Depot. It was super dope, actually. I loved it. But
They both have round parts.
no, I already
yeah,
got
it's
it.
like toilet seat donut, kind of, it sort of, you know. But yeah,
They just
it was.
extruded.
Oh, Jesus. It was interesting. So there was a lot, and it was
CG's
funny because, you know, by the time Jeff was done modeling, I had like I think 20 minutes or something.
You had
to
30.
sit.
He
Was
took 30 and you took 30.
Was it 30?
Yeah.
That's
okay,
that's what I can't do is blame it on the modeler.
Yeah.
Oh no! So Jeff actually killed it.
though.
So
Same
I
thing.
do that all the
yeah,
time.
so Jeff actually, I mean, in my
Did he
eyes,
crush pretty hard?
I feel like Jeff crushed it.
Yeah.
Especially not for not knowing the program.
Not knowing the program, dude. Like, you know,
And
got
being
through.
super hungover. I'm
No,
just gonna
it-
throw that out
you know,
there. I gotta throw that out there.
Way hungover.
Yeah,
He
and
didn't
so,
know that he was going to be on camera that day. And the night before, to be fair and to give Jeff all the credit, he's like, "Am I going to be on camera tomorrow, Gary?" I was like, "No." And we didn't know. I didn't know for sure if he would or wouldn't. But it ended up with the schedule changing, and like, you know, you guys made that video, and that made some room. We didn't want to rebuild the set. There's a lot of other factors that went into it. We were like, this is we actually have to pivot and do this video
You
now.
roll with the punches.
And we went, that was the night that you got in.
And he was
Seth
so
turned it up.
hungover that it's like a day later and he
It's
still
also
hasn't
because
recovered.
Johnny doesn't stop making shots.
yeah. So
Delicious.
just say
anyway,
no.
you want to talk about art again?
back to the topic.
Back to
So
Dustin.
Jeff is super hungover, and he slays this model. Like it was for somebody that does not use Cinema 4D in that.
He did make it the size of a car.
I mean,
There was a scale issue.
there was definitely a scale issue.
David goes at one point, is that one sprinkle
Is 4
5
inches? Yeah.
long?
Yeah, dude. Like this was
So I was just
like
reading the numbers down
Dunkin'
in the bottom.
Donuts. This was like, you know, yeah, this was definitely like an entire restaurant like statue that you would see.
Yeah,
that,
on
like,
top of the restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah, this was
Randy's
it was,
donut.
It was a it was a
Right.
big
Randy's
donut.
The
So,
artistic brief did not include scale, so
yeah, it just had to
It's
be
true.
edible. So whatever, and it wasn't in the end of it. So then when Jeff gets done with this thing, and I sit down, I'm just like, you know, like you're thinking like donut icing, like okay, like that's not too bad. Like sprinkles, whatever, I'll make them one color. And I'm like, I have no idea. As somebody who deals with textures and materials and, you know, like the lighting setup that like could have been tweaked, but I was like, boom, like couple of seconds, like that's not a big deal. And then I'm like, how the hell am I going to create like this donut texture knowing that I don't have the time to actually pull photo reference, paint this all in, unwrap the entire thing, and just do it the way that I would actually do it. I'm like, I just create something that looks like bread.
That was
and then it looks
what
like
I was gonna
MDF.
ask was like when was the last time you like spent like a lot of time just really studying a donut, you know?
I don't even eat donuts other than
he had one
when
in
we're
front
here.
of the table.
It
right
was
in
a
front of
different
him.
donut.
That was a totally different
and
donut.
that donut didn't
Only
come
because
until we
he
were
didn't create
already.
it the same way.
that one would have been really hard.
No,
Yeah,
Jeff was
come
still
on.
modeling when I laid the
You
donut down.
can't
So you had the
model all
donut
of
for the
that.
whole time.
That entire thing would have been like.
I'm saying
full
you, as the
on-
material guy, had a reference in front of you the whole time.
Okay.
That would have. It was different.
What
Okay.
what was Jeff's biggest like challenge with making like the model? Because like I think about it, I'm
Not
like,
throwing up.
well, there's that. Well, isn't like a donut like a what do you call it, like a native shape, primitive?
Yeah. So let
Seth.
me tell you what the largest part of this was, and I laugh now afterwards
the
because I laugh now because I made the same mistake. All right, and I do this, and this is something that pros go through, and really everybody goes through. I see it from beginners to pros, and we overthought it.
Yeah.
The whole fucking donut. We overthought it. And, we're sitting here and Jeff's like modeling it and focused on this and that. And I'm like, oh, dude, just make like the icing drip and like whatever. And something maybe for me, because I knew how to use Cinema 4D a little bit more,
Oh yeah.
could have done it in a different way. But then I realized that as I was trying to explain things to him, like it was totally complicating the process. It was almost making it worse. And so I'm like, he knows what he's doing.
So you were like ADing him.
Yeah. And
And
I like
you
had
were
to-
like the AD who was like,
peanut gallery.
my nephew knows Photoshop really well. And we'll
Oh,
call him
I
up.
was more like the uncle that does photography at,
Yeah.
at a wedding. But so I definitely was sitting there and I'm just like, look, I had to step back and just, kind of let him do his thing because I realized it was getting pretty bad. And then once I got to like the material side of it, it was just like, I kind of like almost internally laughed at myself because I'm just like, you're overthinking it. And then I continued overthinking it the whole time, and
Yeah.
like it's a donut, but then it went to MDF and that's where it ended.
What does MDF stand for?
I have no idea, but I know what it looks like.
David,
David, you're the resident builder. You're Bob the builder.
you're the resident mental encyclopedia. Got nothing. Got
MDF.
nothing.
I know this terminology, but I can't remember what it is. I'm pretty sure the F is fabrication, but I can't remember, and I'm not going to lie.
But you had to make those decisions right at the end. The best thing you could figure out was to use this material.
So what I thought was that I would just try to build it procedurally, which is basically just building it without added textures and things that are just included in the software. That was stupid. It was a good and bad idea because once I got to that point, I started overthinking it more and was thinking that I actually needed far more textures than I thought I did. It was just crazy. It was like a very good, bad experience the whole time. And then you finish and you just sit back and laugh. Like, it was one of those things. So the second challenge was just to do a quick CGI donut comp, right?
Oh, right,
so
right. Yeah, the comp.
That's where you bought the donuts.
Yeah, it was Adobe stock, and I was like, look, if I'm treating this like anything sort of remotely industry related or, just client related in general, there's no way I'm going to use the MDF donut that I just created.
And
with
the donut you chose was a PBR donut. It had everything already on it.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Had the textures already on.
Yeah. That made it a lot easier.
It made it a lot easier. And so where I changed a little bit from what my normal industry workflow would be is I didn't dive into the actual materials. I trusted what was there and I trusted my eye instead of completely overcomplicating every step of it. And then I got to a point where I should have maybe complicated it a little bit more because I would forget stupid things like, oh, I didn't put a material on the other one, or instead of using this little tool, I just kind of fudged it. And what I think is special about those times, though, is that, there are times that a client will come to you and say, look, man, I got 3 hours to get this thing done. Can you do it? I will pay triple your rate, but you've got a very, I know it's a small window, but we need this. And sometimes you can do it and you can fudge the entire project, make it happen, understanding client expectations, and
sometimes you
deliver.
just got to put together something that will ship.
Well, that's why I said I don't look at that as fudging, I guess. I look at it as understanding the project brief and understanding the time constraints, and then saying, this is the best I can do with all of the parameters you gave me.
Right.
Good, cheap,
And that's,
fast, right?
I mean, well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you can have it good, you can have it cheap, and you can have it fast, but you can only have two, right? So, like,
I think the fear that so many people have, probably in both of our fields and many more, like, they're wondering whether their response to the client is like accurate, whether they're saying, I can't do that, or I can only do this much, and the fear in the back of their mind that out there in the world there's somebody else who would be like, I can totally do that like way better in 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
There is always someone else, and I think that's something that people need to understand. And it took me a long time to understand that I didn't have to be that someone else all the time.
Yeah, and you got the confidence to be like, when I say no, I know that my no is informed, and that there's not somebody else right around the corner who could just magically say yes and make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, so
or it could satisfy them in that time, but it would have been the same level of satisfaction that you would have given them, right? Like, I can do this,
get none
but
of that.
right, I can't get any either. but saying, like, basically, like, with the parameters you gave me, I'm going to give you maybe 50% of my overall capabilities, but I'm also realizing that in that moment, that's all I can do. Or, being able, I think the hallmark of a professional is being able to analyze your workload and be like, even if I wanted to, I can't squeeze you in. Like, I don't have that space for that, even 50% or 3 hours of work.
And that's why, and that's why I say, like, there's always that somebody else. I mean, whether you're talking just like straight currency conversion, like there's like, I've had clients that have gone overseas for work, and they're just like, oh, you're too expensive. I mean, even if I were to discount my prices, they're like, it's too much. And I'm like, look, it's not. This project's
not your client.
Do you think it's better in CGI to give you a quote based on the project or by the hour? Because there's sticker shock for American prices or U.S. prices for the most part, Canadian too probably, of like, oh, this is you per hour.
Yeah, Dustin
But if I can go overseas and be like, oh, it's that per hour, that person could take 10 times as long and they could be more expensive. But
yeah, so there's
it might run with your whole project and you'll never see them again.
Like I have a baseline right now, and this is probably going to change. I've been basically trying to somewhat up my prices every year, like as I go, just incrementally, sometimes large jumps. But I do both.
So you're like Bitcoin, you're like crypto. Sometimes it's a lot.
He's totally like crypto.
Yeah, I guess. Sometimes I
it
crash,
dips
sometimes
back down.
whatever. Just buy more. So it's really interesting because there are times that I do both. If it makes sense to me to help it work for a client, like I can go, and just do like an hourly rate if I know it's going to be cheaper than charging a day or a half day rate, whatever. But there are quite a few times that I actually like to work, flat rate. And a lot of people look down on it, but with the resources that you have, there's a lot of shit you can get done quickly.
So what could go wrong with a flat rate?
So a flat rate, basically you could burn yourself and you misquote, kind of like Dave said, you need to be able to gauge what you have on your plate and what that one project is going to take away, or
and is that a flat rate with a contract that clearly articulates back and forth rounds and the amount of rounds?
And the rounds, yeah. So when you go into it, you like I would bill for actual review rounds. So I generally, if it's a smaller project, I have like one hard review round that stays there, and the other one I call like flex or soft rounds that, like, if they were to approve that round
like
one,
your garbage masks.
It's garbage mask. But like if they approve it after round one, and I mean it's like deliverable approved, then
you're out of rounds. Like, it's like a video game.
Like
you're out of lives.
good. Like I'm not billing you. I'm not billing you for that second round. But there definitely are times, like if you miscalculate your workload, it's just going to be a lot of stress, because now you're going to end up having to work I wouldn't even say necessarily if you miscalculate your workload. It's not just your current workload, but it's the workload that project demands. And
do you think that's the just physical being in the chair doing it, or the back and forth communication, wasting of time with all the fucking people involved?
Both. So you ask when you're working.
So one can be dictated by a contract and changed, the other one can't.
Right. And so it just, yeah, I mean, that's flat rate, but there are a lot of times where you can get, like big wins on flat rate projects.
Yeah.
Because you build them
and you're 10 times faster than the average bear.
Or
they're paying for your experience.
Right. And you know how to get shit done quickly, but that comes with understanding the project, making it, like Seth said earlier, sometimes you have to go back and forth and almost annoy the hell out of a client to actually figure out what they really need and understand how you're going to execute that. Because there are times where I've by far overcomplicated projects for a client when I could have just went, and instead of paying or outsourcing a modeler to do certain things, I could have just bought something off a freaking CG trader, and it would have just been quick and finished. And I'm like, look, I charge you for 2 weeks worth of a project that I could have gotten done in like 3 days. But instead I went through these other processes, and I used to, before I knew better, I was getting myself in a lot of trouble early on, like very early on. It was a lot of work.
Well, the fear generally seems to be that I only have two choices. I can say yes or no. And I see a lot of people do that. What's your rate? You're like, I can either say yes or no to this. And the yes is saying a rate. The no is, not, I guess. But you have more choices because you have conversations with clients. And I find that, like, hands down, the best thing to do is just to be straight with them and just be like, I need to understand your project more before I can really quote you anything.
I mean, I feel like it's the yes, but, right? So like we have yes and we have no, but then we have the yes, but. Like the yes, but here's the constraints that I'm going to give you for my services, or just here's what's possible. Here's what's within my left and right limits. Like if I go beyond this, I'm going to tank your project. So yes, I can do this, but if I do, either you're going to pay me to put other projects aside, or yes, but I'm going to need X amount of time, or yes, but like, and then once you've set those expectations, I think that's when it is less likely that people are going to experience dissatisfaction. So I think a lot of times people tend to be dissatisfied with services when either they or the person providing the service didn't communicate what was exactly going to happen. So one of two parties had some level of uncommunicated expectation. That expectation wasn't fulfilled, and so now they're butthurt, right?
I find that often those inquiries that come in where they just say, please submit your project proposal and rate to me. Those tend to be, and it's a varying degree of like inhumanness, and because some of them are like form letters, right? Where they're just
they're fishing.
What are they called? Requests for proposal. They're just they're fishing, and it's almost like an open pool. I don't compete in those. I do not waste my time doing that stuff. But sometimes they'll just ask you for a straight rate, and that can indicate that is a client who has a history of just basically using sort of like going to the mall and buying services, CG, or, it's like sort of like the retail retouching marketplace where exactly they're just like ordering a product. They don't really care about you individually.
It's fast. It's convenient.
They need to get
not
stuff
personal.
done. That's cool. It's just not where I'm at, but I know lots of people who do well serving those kind of clients. It's just money.
But at some point, I think it also, to your analogy, comes down to, do you want to be volume or do you want to be boutique? Are you seeking to find satisfaction in your craft at the same time you're finding money? And I think, just like if you're, again, going back to this metaphor of a mall versus a boutique, typically at a boutique, you might pay more, but you're getting something that's more unique and individualized to you and your style versus it's fast, it's quick, it's convenient, all the reasons why people go to malls, right?
And these are a lot of the conversations that I have, and the conversation we were having was like how to start thinking differently about these things, because especially when you like work in-house at a studio or work in-house at an agency, you're kind of like one of the cogs within it. You don't have an identity to your brands or clients. How do you start having that individual identity to your clients, right? How do they know you? It can be tough to do because you have to communicate that. And
I think it's earning trust though too.
Well, it's earning trust, but you first have to basically be able to step outside of the veil in front of you that's presented by like you as an employee. Those are great ways to get all the skills that you need by working with teams.
Right.
But once you step out of that, it can be a tricky ground to like navigate.
Well, I mean, I can't speak from CGI or retoucher perspective, but from photographer, I feel like a big way to do that is you get this project, an art director or a creative director, whoever's telling you, or the client themselves are telling you what they want. And you're like, man, I'm not really in love with this idea at all, but I'll execute it. And then at the end, I would typically go around and say like, I'm going to do it my way in the last couple of minutes, 30 minutes that I have left, and then present both projects.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. And then I present both projects, right?
Yeah.
And then,
that's like what Johnny was just talking
right.
about, putting 30 minutes at the end of a shoot to just like do some exploration.
And I think that's how you
something cool comes up.
I think that's how you earn trust at the end. It's like when people start to see like, oh,
Did we just become friends?
we just did become friends. Like at the end of it is like, okay, now I've proven to you, I've delivered your concept, and now I'm comparing and contrasting with the way I wanted to do it. And you, the client, might very well say, thanks, I don't like your idea.
Well, I think it's just one strategy, and it's a good strategy. But there are a bunch of them. One of them, I think, is like the way that you communicate and the language. I have run the entire spectrum because I've been in so many different agencies. I have dealt with clients in this super clinical, very, very, very highly professional language through the emails that I write to them and getting them to sign this perfect contract, all the way to kind of where I am now, where I'm just like a straight up individual human voice. And those are all the decisions between those two are kind of difficult to map, because I have actually run into clients who said, wow, it's so nice that you actually are just like straight up. And you say things like, yeah, I don't really know if I can do that. Like, can I ask you some questions? Can I get you on a call? And I think a lot of people are reticent to have that individual voice. They want to sound more like they're like super ultra professional,
like the studios. I mean, they want to sound like a studio or a larger entity. And, and it's it's definitely something that it took me a while to get where I'm at in the sense of being comfortable being just me when I'm talking to people, and realizing I don't, like there's projects at times, depending on who it is, that I may not even sign a contract, and we'll just go with it, understanding the expectations.
I spent so many hours producing jobs, creating perfect contracts, and now I'm just like, I know this person's going to pay me.
I mean, and when it's there, and and there are times, and the fun part about it is that it not only allows you to build trust when you're able to talk to people just as you are, and I believe in, I'll say, overachieving. I used to really call it like under promising and overachieving, on projects where like we would get the project done and then I would do that extra mile and make it look good in the way that I saw fit. And that's a good way to build trust. But the biggest difference, I think, is, when you work for a larger studio, you have it's almost like this weight. It's like a weight that you have on your shoulders because you're dealing with so many different stresses, at large scale studios. So, for me, it's, for instance, when I worked in automotive, we have a studio full of like 40 modelers, we'll just say like 200 artists
40
combined.
modelers
Yeah, in like one room. It was kind of cool.
in one room.
Yeah. It
It's
was
like everyone like in cubicles.
kind of, sort of.
What do the modelers all eat for lunch?
I have no
That's
idea.
You don't know?
They
You
had
didn't hang
their
out with them?
entire different section of space over there.
So
but
all
it was-
those like texture
You
people hung
segregate.
out?
Yeah.
Do they let the modelers like interact with you guys?
They're like the coders.
I mean, may or may not have.
This
been
is a
like
caste
occasional-
system, clearly.
Yeah, like Nerf wars back and forth between departments.
There's just like Nerf sieges.
But it is interesting when you mentioned, like being a cog, because it definitely, like, I mean, there is that pressure from all sides as you're starting to spin and all of a sudden things start happening. But the interesting part about it is when I realized, like that, one, you can say no and just not take a project completely. Like you just may not want to do it. And, that's one. But when you start to really feel comfortable dictating feedback and responding to feedback and call outs and things that you weren't previously able to control or even converse about. It was just, look, this is what we're doing, a 65-page PDF full of markups. Like this is what's happening.
That
We need it
sounds
done by Friday.
Like a sad story.
I mean, but it is, this type of stuff happens at times, and there are times like that where I kind of remember now, and I'm just like, look, I'll sit and have a Zoom call with a client and be like, look, this is not the best way to go about this. Here's what we can do. This is why I feel this way, and just start to educate the clients so that as they work with me, not only do they really trust what I'm saying and the overall vision and understand that I can do certain things, but there are things that they may pay me for that's not even worth their money. It's not worth their time, and I'd much rather create longevity in projects and sustainable,
I think
returning clients.
I mean, I think those conversations when you're talking not about like your limitations or your desires, but more about protecting your clients. So whether that's
Right.
protecting their money or their image or anything like that resonates with them.
Definitely.
I mean, you might be motivated by the fact of like, I really don't want to do X in
Sometimes.
this, but if you present it as though, not necessarily this
In
is
their
about me,
interest.
but it's about
Yeah.
you. It's
Yeah.
about your interest. Then it just goes a lot farther. And then I think that helps establish those relationships where people are more prone to be like, I'm going to come back to you because I know you're telling me what I need to do versus what I want to do.
You're being straight up.
All right.
I'm curious because my experience after, during doing my first tutorial, did you feel any pressure that you're sharing industry techniques that certain keepers of those techniques would not want you to share with this, to the broader public,
No.
give access to?
No, I really don't care.
Okay. No,
Like,
I mean,
yeah,
but
and I
yeah, does
understand
that
what you're saying.
exist? Because are any of these like, things that are kind of people think that their jobs rely maybe on keeping some of their techniques to themselves?
I'm sure there is. I can't say that there's not that type of atmosphere. We have that in every industry, any creative, whatever, regardless of what it is. I didn't really feel any pressure with that at all. And, part of it was because, I'm just going to do what I do. I've spent a long enough time, like, worried about the way that everybody else wanted me to do things, like in the industry. Like, you have to learn this workflow specifically for this, regardless of whether or not you found a quicker way to go about it. Like, this is how every Photoshop file needs to be done. Fuck it. It doesn't have to be that way. And so what we do is, right now at least, like we'll get to some highly advanced stuff and a bunch of different things. But I want to show photographers, especially photographers, because that's primarily who we're targeting at the moment, that it's not so hard. And I think that's the biggest thing that, like, a lot of people don't want you to know. Oh, Dustin's doing it wrong. He's using Photoshop. He's not, using linear workspace or color space and this and that and everything else. He's doing it wrong. Like, no, it's not. I'm getting shit done, and I'm going to show you how to learn how to do it. Use the software, work with materials, lighting,
That's awesome.
post-production, and start to serve clients. Because at the end of the day, clients aren't going to care. And they're really not going to care how it gets done. If it's, say, for a higher level client, they'll let you know what they need, understanding deliverables, and then you can start to build a process and a workflow to be able to execute that quicker.
I mean, we're a service industry. At the end of the day, if you provide for your client and your client's happy, win. If you can do that in the shortest amount of time so you can get to making more money with somebody else, win. Like,
Right.
I definitely have some thoughts on this. And as we've partnered with Maxon, it kind of like came more clear into perspective, right? So in looking at, and also being a part of the photography education release to the world, I think I was there for a lot of the uncomfortable conversations that you probably got online and hate mail that you got. We were getting the same shit back in the like early days of this company of like,
Yeah.
this is industry, like, oh, you're going to take my jobs. And the common denominator and all that was like, these are the old
guard.
white guys that are fucking mad and they've been doing it forever. And, like with CGI, I look at that and I'm like, well, this really hasn't been around nearly as long as photography at all.
Right.
So now I'm looking at this community and like when I look at it now, like I think of one of the people we sponsor, or like we're their biggest sponsor. HDR Haven, Texture Haven, Model Haven, Poly Haven.
Yeah.
We're their biggest sponsor because they give everything away for free and they do it for nothing. And the only thing they ask is like, hey, like they opened it up to Patreon, and that they were my first Patreon in the early days. We were like, yeah, we'll give you the biggest donation you're asking for because you're making models and textures and HDRIs for free, which allows us to like continue to teach. So you guys aren't afraid of it. So we will now we're their biggest sponsor and like we give them money every month just to like thank you for doing this. It's so shout out to them and like shout out to everyone that's like making it free and like accessible. So awesome.
So like the 3D, or we'll just say CGI. I keep saying 3D and CGI. I mean the same thing.
What do you like to say? Because I need to know. I need to know what I should be saying.
Know anymore. We'll just
He goes
call
both
it like,
ways.
Gary, it's a
I
balance.
go both ways.
Retouching or post production? I don't know. It's the
don't
same
know.
thing.
Oh, man, this is tough.
Or compositing. I mean, what is
Yeah,
it?
who knows?
It's all the same. So the thing that I love most about the 3D industry compared to, say, the photography industry, right? Like the photography industry is interesting, and this is just my experience, that, there are those secrets like you talked about. There are those things that like I'm not going to give you my time, or I'm not going to, give you the tool or show you how to use it. And then the people who do are highly criticized. But
also highly valued by the
but
people
highly-
who love learning from them.
Right.
In
It's
a
in
mixed
the
bag.
3D
It's like-
industry, it's very open in the sense that a lot of these high level artists don't give a fuck. Like they are making insane stuff, and then they're giving it away. Will literally give it away for free without Patreon, or they'll have a $5, $10, $15 a month Patreon where you can start to download files.
Yeah.
Some of them are old like client project files, and then they're also say Cineversity. FNS is like he has this entire series where they're like he's breaking down certain visual elements from like shorts and teaser trailers and all this different stuff because studios are awesome enough to give him access to the files, and he just breaks it down.
That's the word that I like heard just over the course of the past 5-10 minutes said multiple times. Access. It's funny that access is a central point of some of these discussions in digital work. Like access is important.
Yeah.
Everything is political, even our digital tools. And so, when I see this change, when you talk about CG being so much more open, whereas retouching and photography really wasn't, and it is much older, so it kind of makes sense that access or limited access was an important part of people preserving value and status quo.
The funny thing I find about that always is most of the time, like it goes back to the old saying, knowledge is power, right? Like I'm trying to keep my knowledge so that I can keep my power, so I can keep my position in the pecking order of the industry. But ultimately, like there's more jobs than any one person that person that's at the top of the pecking order could possibly do. Their position is not threatened in any way, shape, or form. So by opening it up, you actually preserve the industry further. I honestly think that the reason photography as a field blew up is and imploded in the traditional sense of people taking on the educational of like, I will apprentice for you. And then from that, I will earn my own spurs to go out and do this by myself. The reason that imploded was, I think, one, cameras became more accessible and cheaper. But two, I think those old, mostly white guys, sorry for everybody who's offended right now.
It always
sorry.
is. It always
but,
is.
you know, they were basically trying to hold on to their position, and it was fear-based for them. And because they became so afraid, they stopped empowering the next generation. By not empowering the next generation, primarily with the one thing they should learn from you, which is pricing and business practices, you had people who were forced to go out into the world and do it anyway and learn on their own. But in doing so, they didn't learn the one thing that they needed to learn, which was how to preserve the pricing so that the whole field stayed basically at the same playing level. And since those people had no idea, the one thing you were trying to avoid, which was the death of your industry, ended up coming anyway because you didn't help people learn what standard pricing and your fear actually made your truth become
You're
truth.
talking about a scarcity model. I had like my thesis instructor in painting at college said you could steal all of Van Gogh's brushes and paints and his canvases, and you would never make a single painting that was like his.
Right.
It's that thing. It's like if you work in a scarcity model, you're gonna live a lonely and cold life.
Right.
You know, if you work in a model of abundance and teaching, you're just gonna be happier, and you're gonna support the.
I mean,
the
at the end of the day,
community.
like how sad is it? Like if you achieved your objective and you kept all your knowledge and your power to yourself, your time on the planet is only so long.
Yeah.
Period. And if you die and you never share anything with anybody else, then that means that humanity is now a step further behind than it was before because you never decided to tell any other person how you do your thing.
I feel like
That
this
sucks.
is one of those podcasts that we are gonna uncover the secrets of the universe.
Not really, because we're already at an hour.
Well, on the next episode.
On the
In the next episode, we actually uncover the secrets of the universe.
That's a huge incentive to stay
with
tuned.
modeler Jeff.
Do you want to stick around and do one more?
Yeah, sure, man. Dude, Secrets of the Universe is a huge payoff. I'm not
In
leaving.
the next episode, we uncover the secrets of the universe.
Or how to build the universe.
Or how
How to
already
model
built.
it.
it's already built.
How to model it, Gary.
How to model it.
Jeez,
Dude.
come on, man. Like
I'm sorry. I'm new.
All you
here.
gotta
I'm
do
new
is,
here.
like-
I'm the new guy.
spheres.
Buy all the nebulas and planets and stuff off Pixel Squid. It's right there.
Put it all together.
Yeah, just surface them.
How many polygons do you
Turbo
think are in the
squid.
universe?
Pixel
Sure,
squids.
whatever.
Photoshop.
I don't know what I'm talking about half the time.
Well, guys, thank you for entertaining me. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, is
And,
this for you, this whole thing?
Well, entertaining us.
He'll listen to it here
God
before he
damn
goes
it.
to bed. It'll be good.
I've never listened to one.
That was awesome. Thanks.
Dustin, I'd appreciate if you could edit this podcast before you go to bed tonight. You are the audio guy here. Come on. We need you to flex. Make this sound good. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Dustin. Final words of wisdom from Dustin. Go.
Autobots roll out.
Pro EDU is now unlimited. Get access to every single tutorial. Sign up at proedu.com today. But you, I'll take comfort in that. This podcast is officially over. See you next time. Never stop